We need to examine equity and race and civil rights and education reform to see how they fit together and to make sure they do fit together. It's a challenge that all of us in this room can undertake. It's a challenge I think we have to undertake, and it's a challenge we can win. As I said, I am a reformer. The National Council of La Raza has been deeply engaged in education reform. We were among the strongest supporters of No Child Left Behind. We are among the strongest supporters of accountability for everyone. We are among the strongest supporters of effective teaching. But we truly do believe that the voice of communities has been left out of the conversation, and beyond the conversation has been left out of the process. It's time for a mid-course correction, or we're in danger of losing and keeping the momentum that reform has brought about. Scaling up is something that we talk about. It's something we're going to have to do if we're going to make sure education reform has impact in every school across this country, or the majority of schools across this country. Your support has created great models of education reform. Your support has created great models of teacher preparation. And your support has created great models of leadership. We have got to take that and blend it with community voice, with stakeholders' voices about what they think is right for their school, how they want their school to respond to students, and how to pull the best together of what is valued in a particular neighborhood. It's not about backing down on accountability. It's not about backing down on change. It's about figuring out how we are able to scale up those ideas that we have. And we're not going to be able to scale up if we don't include community. As I said, it's time for a mid-course correction. We're in danger of losing yet another civil rights battle if we don't do this. Thank you very much. Did I hit my mark?
You hit the mark. Yes,
10 minutes.
Yes, that's right. And I didn't have to figure out a polite way to tell you to shush. So now you guys, I tell you, I'm just sitting here reeling. One, I wish we had more than 10 minutes to have this conversation because what you both laid out is pretty compelling. So let's get down to brass tacks on a couple things. One, we're in a room with funders. And, you know, I love my colleagues, I love my field, so in case I say something my board wouldn't like, please don't repeat it back. But in this field, I mean, we have some of us, as you said, we've been funding this for a long time. And Katie, as you talked about with the higher ed, you know, you gave us some data around, you know, that these young people are achieving. It's just a matter of putting around the supports and the like around them. So what is it that we as philanthropy can do differently that we haven't been doing to get our folks, our students of color, marginalized, and those that are low income, to graduate, and to engage them in ensuring that their K-12 education system works well? What is what would you like us to do? Well, not if, now that you have a group of us in this room, actually tell us what we should do.
Oh, we're fighting about who goes first. I think the first thing we need to do is, I've said it, figure out how you bring in the voice of community. And that sounds like a simple statement, but it really is about asking the right questions as you're funding projects, as you're going in and funding accountability projects, assessment projects, teacher training projects. I think one of the first questions to ask is, who's at the table? How are you thinking about English language learners in this process? Who have you included in the community in designing this project? Those are some very basic questions you could ask up front. I also think, quite honestly, that as foundations, you might look within and see who is at your table, who is on your board, who are your staff members. And I think those are the basic things you start with in getting to this.
And I have colleagues, and Katie, I would like for you to respond, but also, you know, we have colleagues in this room where conversations around race and equity aren't happening. You know, there's, whether it's fear, whether it's people who think they know it all. I mean, really doing a power and structural analysis around structural racism and a power analysis really doesn't happen as it should within our foundations. So the kind of engagement of community and bringing in voices that will help to deal with that power imbalance isn't really happening at our board, senior leadership, or staff levels. Any encouragement or thoughts there other than you need to just do it?
Well, you need to just do it, and I recognize how hard it is. It's hard as a Hispanic American for me to talk about race, even though I am a minority. It's hard for all of us to talk about race. It's hard for us to talk about, it's like, okay, you're going to talk about race. What does that have to do with really making changes? Well, it's a very basic, it affects how you think. So I would encourage you to look within, I really would. And to actually take a scientific approach, because I think looking at the numbers that Katie brings and others bring, I think sort of brings home what those needs are.
Yeah, I may be weird. I don't have any problem talking about race. That's all we talk about is race. And I actually think that Delia's right, that the reason we use numbers is not because we're infatuated with numbers, but it's a way of actually having honest conversations about what is, so people aren't so much sort of thinking about, well, this is what I think, this is what I think. Numbers actually help people to do that. But I want to elaborate on a suggestion that I think Delia made that is fundamentally important. You know, we've gotten a bit bogged down in a structural fight without remembering that no matter what structure you're committed to, whether you're committed to a structure of choice and competition, or you're committed to a structure of a traditional public school district getting better, or frankly, you're committed to colleges getting better, that doesn't work unless there's strong demand. Right. And what we have not done nearly as effectively as we need to is help build that demand. It's natural, it's there, it's waiting, but we neither give people honest information on how their kids are doing. We don't respect the things that are important to them, but not so much to us, like safety, for example. And we don't actually help people mobilize so other people mobilize them. So, I mean, this is a real serious issue. If we're going to move the needle forward, we have to focus not just on the structure, not just on the people doing the work, not just on new mechanisms like value added and so on, although all those things are important. We have to make the demand side work. And until people push for excellence everywhere, until we're willing not to allow any child to go to a lousy school, then we're not going to make the progress we need to.
So the role for philanthropy in that?
The fact of the matter is, right now, there are all kinds of little CBOs around the country that would love to get into this work, whose members are telling them to get into this work, and they can't get funding to do that. So where do they go? Frankly, they go to the unions. Most of these little CBOs are dependent upon AFSCME-controlled dollars, right? And the message on that is very clearly, don't tango with the unions. So if you actually want an authentic voice to really rise up and be squarely about what's right for kids and what's right for parents, then it's got to be independent of those kinds of entanglements.
Fund advocacy. I think we, as a philanthropic community, we have tended to shy away at the big level. There are lots of you who fund advocacy, but not at a high level. And really, what Katie is saying hits the nail on the head. We've got to support the groups who already have an interest so they can build more interest in the community.
And again, before we turn it over to some questions from the audience, talk about how that advocacy then results in the policy changes that the both of you have discussed in your presentations.
I think one of the ways it happens is by looking at practice. Policy is meaningless unless it comes from practice and unless it comes from informed voices who hold deep values about what that policy should be.
So, and that's your scaling up.
And that's your scaling up piece. You start with what's worked, you start with what has support, and you build policy around that so that it goes beyond a few communities and you've got a policy that supports it across the country.
And for higher ed?
Well, I mean, frankly, the higher ed is even more adept than K-12 is at fending off challenge. They make you all feel stupid for questioning anything they do, and they've got more researchers than you do. But the reality is they're going to be responsive to public pressure. They are already beginning, as you can see, they're beginning to tip the issue toward, through a lot of good work from Lumina and Gates, to tip them toward completion. But again, they're very slippery here, and so it's got to be a concerted effort to make sure there's honest information. Here's what happens. So every time a college has 13 more Latino students, they send out a big news report saying we have 13 more Latino students than we did last year. Yay us. What they don't ever tell you is that actually that their Latino student population is smaller proportionally to the high school graduating class, which got way more Latino in the meantime. So they're celebrating falling backwards. You have to call them on that. Somebody has to call them on that, because otherwise they're only too happy to congratulate themselves and allow you to congratulate them for progress. We can't let that happen.
Yeah, and what you laid out in your data was that structurally, if we continue to enable that to happen, we will just continue to perpetuate inequity.
You bet. You bet.
Now, I can go on all day, but I know that I'm supposed to be polite to you all. And I would ask if anyone had any questions. Yes, ma'am. To the microphone, please. And again, if we can gear our questions towards solution and call to action.
Hi, I'm Karen Kalish of Family Foundation in St. Louis. Katie, first of all, I want to say that I'm really disappointed that we didn't have time to hear your whole presentation.
That's right.
And
go get it on the web. It's no problem.
Can we get it on, those of us who want it, can we get it on the EdTrust website?
Yeah, I did not plant this.
Okay. I think EdTrust is the organization that said that when young people in inner cities graduate from high school, they have the equivalent of an 8th grade education. Is that statistic still true? And my second question had to do with why Korea is so high on these charts. And the third is, I think I'm understanding this, but I'm not sure, but you're saying all this money is going to families that make up to $160,000 and not to the lowest income?
That's correct.
Is this like it's a better investment to invest in those than?
No, what matters in higher ed is the pursuit of prestige. And you get prestige from high-scoring students. You don't get it from low-income kids or kids of color. You don't get any points in ranking systems for serving your community and serving it well. You get the points only for how prestigious your students are. And so that's why we spend those dollars in that way. It's about working your way up the ratings list. Yeah, what she's referring to are the data from the National Assessment of Education Progress that suggests that Latino and African American kids are exiting 12th grade with skills in both reading and in mathematics that are virtually identical to those of white youngsters at the end of 8th grade. And that sadly remains true today. Korea is, as I think those of you who have watched it, a fascinating story of a country that was way behind. We're talking about South Korea, of course, way behind the rest of the world in terms of education outcomes in both K-12 and in higher education, and has made a very concerted effort. Highly educated teachers, a very robust curriculum, a real focus on improvement, and the kids are competing hard to earn their way into the 21st century's economy.
And they also did the standards, correct?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, again, I think all the countries that are beating us have strong national standards, right? Yeah. They don't leave it to their teachers to make up what to teach. Really solid curricular supports, and that's the thing that Delia mentioned. I want to come back to. If this next round of education reform is like the last one, that is new standards, new tests, then go teach, we're going to have the same results we had last time. We have to provide teachers with really high quality, coherent instructional materials, lessons, units, assignments. They are begging for them. And we keep saying, well, it's local control. Let's get in and deliver this time. It'll make a huge difference.
Right. And that's, again, a role for philanthropy around that research, around that best practice.
Absolutely. And scaling up. You've got really solid curricula, especially elementary curricula like core knowledge, that with a few million extra could actually become an open source platform for teachers all across America that would make a huge difference to kids and a huge difference for teachers. but they can't even raise the money to do that.
And
so,
demand.
It's a huge, huge.
And demand. The, NCLR has been